Jorge Madrazo. I'm the VP for Community Relations with CMAR Community Health Centers, and I'm the director of the Center of Mexican Studies of UNAM in the University of Washington.
Can you tell us about your family background and early education and what made you decide to pursue a scholarly career?
Okay. I'm a member of a big Mexican family, traditional family, myself and 5 sisters. So I may say that I grew up on the streets. It's a middle-income family. I grew up in the north part of Mexico City, in the Azcapotzalco zip code. So I went to private education from kindergarten to high school. I attended high school at the Universidad La Salle in Mexico City. And then I got my law degree by the National University of Mexico Law School. And I would say they're the most important influence that made me decide to follow the law degree, the legal profession. It was my uncle. His name was Ignacio Garcia Telles. Ignacio Garcia Telles used to be one of the closest collaborators of General Cárdenas. He was the first president of the National Autonomous University of Mexico, the creator of the Mexican Polytechnic Institute, the first director of the Mexican Institute of Social Services. And yes, just watching him, how to work with that, he was a lawmaker. He prepared the first draft of the Mexican Civil Code. So I was very attracted to that type of work. So I decided to study law. Let me tell you that my first idea was to be a lawyer working in the courts, just developing this liberal profession. I never thought that I would be serving the Mexican government. And well, much of my life after my law degree, it was at the National University of Mexico, teaching constitutional law, and researching at the Institute of Legal Science. And one given day, I went to serve the government and the Mexico as a country. Yes, that was what happened with me.
Thank you. In the 1980s, you were working with Jorge Carpizo, who was then the director of legal research at the UNAM, and later became the president of UNAM, a Supreme Court justice, director of the Human Rights Commission, attorney general, and secretary of government. From the time you worked with him in law school, was he your mentor? Did he encourage you to go into public service?
Totally, Bill. I was a student of constitutional law with Professor Carpizo in year 1975. And after that, when we finished the course of constitutional law, he invited me to work with him at the office of the Attorney General of the National University of Mexico. And I became his assistant in that position. And I started helping him in his course of constitutional law as something that we call adjunct professor. It's not exactly the same, the position of adjunct professor in the US than in Mexico. I just worked as his assistant for many years. So after the office of the Attorney General, he was appointed the coordinator of humanities, the provost for humanities at UNAM. And I was the second on board. It was the secretary of the Technical Council of Humanities. When years after he was appointed the director of the Institute of Legal Science, he appointed me as the academic secretary. And then when he left the institute, I was appointed dean of the Institute of Legal Science, following him, and he was appointed the president of the National University. And I helped him in many activities of the National University, not only serving as the dean of the institute. I was the dean of the institute, I was the provost for humanities, and I helped him to implement some important reforms that we attempted those years.
Did he encourage you to go into public life or to stay at the university?
Well, he was a teacher and professor and researcher all the way. His fabric was precisely that, being a professor, being a teacher. But nevertheless, in year 1990, President Salinas appointed Professor Carpizo as the first president of the National Commission for Human Rights. Those days, we faced a crisis in terms of human rights in the middle of the negotiations of NAFTA. And, well, the government thought that the creation of an ombudsman to defend human rights, besides the judiciary, it was a very good move forward. And President Salinas appointed my professor, Professor Carpizo, as the first chairman. And my professor invited me to help him in the National Commission for Human Rights. So in 1990, I left my position as the Dean of the Institute of Legal Science in UNAM to help the National Commission of Human Rights under his command, being something that we call visitador. I would say inspector. I was in charge of the investigation of complaints for violation of human rights. So yes, he invited me to serve the National University. He was my mentor, my academic father. I grew up academically with him. And at the same time, he invited me to serve Mexico. Not only the government of Mexico, but to serve Mexicans in that significant and difficult positions.
From 1993 to 1996, you were the second president of the National Commission on Human Rights. Can you describe the conditions limiting your commission's ability to enforce the protection of human rights by a federal government agency? And in particular, were limits placed on your ability to investigate human rights abuses by the armed forces?
Let me say that, yes, it was difficult for many authorities in different levels, federal, state, local, to follow the rules, to follow the human rights directives, already in the Constitution and in many other secondary legislation. The culture of human rights those days was, I would say, very, very weak. Through the National Commission of Human Rights, as a tool, we start creating that culture. Within the authorities, within the people in charge of different offices in the federal government and in the state's level as well. Creating the belief that they must follow always, constantly, the principles of human rights, the principles of dignity of all human beings. This is very, very easy to say, but very difficult to implement. When we start working under Professor Carpizo in the National Commission for Human Rights, one of the most significant violations, it was torture. You can imagine that? Torture in the 1990s in Mexico. Yes, we had that. And for many years, we created the culture that was totally wrong. We present many, many recommendations to the public opinion against those authorities. And I think that little by little, things start changing. When I started in 1993, torture was not the most significant cause of violation of human rights. It was a problem regarding the delivery of some public services, problems regarding the due process of law, problems of the timing that an investigation may consume to present criminal accusations, to file charges, and other problems regarding social services, or public services. So what I can say is that since 1990, the culture of human rights has been growing with ups and downs, And the role of the National Commission has been very crucial. Today, one of the most independent voices of Mexico is precisely the voice of the president of the National Commission for Human Rights. By the way, the current president, he was part of the same team with Professor Carpizo. So I think that the goal is far. We need to work together. We need to work citizens, association of citizens and government, precisely to maintain the principle of the human rights constantly in our daily lives.
Was there some collaboration between your agency at that time with independent human rights organizations, both national and international?
Yes, we were open to the NGOs for human rights. We had a community council composed by people from the society, precisely, giving some general directions to the daily operation of the Commission of Human Rights. So yes, we had and we have today this very good relationship. Not with all, there are some difficulties sometimes, but I think this is the policy that we have followed. And you, before you answer about the promise with the military, with the army, yes, we have. And we present public recommendations. You know, this is the tool that the ombudsman used to change things, public recommendations. And we pronounce public recommendations against the army. Most of the time, the recommendations were accepted and followed. And sometimes we have some resistance as well. But I think that every single day we are progressing in that regard. And the military, little by little, is changing some beliefs and respecting human rights.
Exploring your leadership of the National Commission of Human Rights, I learned that during that time you also wrote a number of things, and in those publications you included the right to development. What do you mean by the right to development?
Well, the right of development is one of the rights recognized by the United Nations. It's part of the declarations and covenants of the United Nations. Many treaties are now related to the right of development. And the idea is to provide some new tools to tackle the problem of inequality in one hand, and to provide instruments to make the economy grow, to have more revenue, to have a better distribution of income, to open Mexico to new markets. All of those were elements of this idea of development.
Was there an acceptance of these publications and of this discussion of development as a human right in Mexico? Do you think that?
Yes, I think that they are accepted. But what we need is not only the verbal, the oral acceptance of something. We need to implement those ideas. We need to implement those rights. The human rights in the third generations, the political rights, the social rights, the economic rights. And there is a lot of work to be done. I think that we are still at the very beginning.
After the Zapatista Army of National Liberation, the Ezln Uprising in Chiapas, Mexico on January 1st, 1994, you served on the Peace Commission to Chiapas from 1994 to 1995. In your opinion, what did that commission actually accomplish? And as part of a broader transition to democracy in Mexico, to what extent were there any significant changes in the treatment of and political position of indigenous groups in Mexico?
Very interesting and significant questions. Well, I was appointed Commissioner for Peace and Reconciliation by President Salinas in June 1994. The Zapatistas movement started, as you may remember, January the 1st, 1994, the same day NAFTA became in force. Unfortunately, on March the 23rd, we had the assassination of the candidate of the PRI, Mr. Luis Donaldo Colosio. And the first Peace Commissioner, Mr. Manuel Camacho, had some very unfair accusations of involving in that assassination. It was totally false. But nevertheless, when that happened and when the public opinion learned this criticism, Mr. Camacho says to present his resignation. In the middle of the conflict, in the middle of the conversation with the Zapatistas to reach peace agreements. So he left that position, and then President Salinas asked me to serve as the peace commissioner from middle of June to the end of November, to the end of the President Salinas' term. We didn't sign the peace agreements those days, but we haven't signed the peace agreements so far. So I think that the accomplishments that we had in those 5 to 6 months, it was to keep everything in peace. We didn't have in the area of conflict, in the counties where the Zapatistas were located, any significant problem during June to November of 1994. Everything was, I would not say peacefully, but at least with no major issues, with no major incidents. So I think that was my grain of salt to solve the problem. The second part of your question, what is going on with the indigenous reality, indigenous people reality? Well, we have the Zapatistas movement, the Ezln, with the idea of changing the life of indigenous groups in Mexico. Today, we have about 15% of the Mexican population that identify themselves as indigenous. It's a big number. In many states of Mexico, not only the South, not only the state of Chiapas, but all over the country. And something that is really concerning is that the real condition of these people after the Ezln uprising hasn't changed. I think that they are living in very poor conditions. There are no difference of being poor and being indigenous. We had that in 1994, and we have this in 2018. So I think that we need to use more tools to change the current situation. I think that we shouldn't accept the very poor condition in which the indigenous people in Mexico is living. But that movement didn't change. We have new norms. We have a new chapter of the Constitution with indigenous rights, with the recognition of self-government, with the recognition of customary law. But in our daily lives, nothing has changed. It is a problem of Mexico. The problem is what the norms establish and what happened in real life.
In 1996, President Ernesto Zedillo asked you to serve as Attorney General for Mexico. Could you talk about your experience in that crucial office during the next 4 years?
Let me start by saying, Bill, that I never thought, I never dreamed, I never had in my expectations to become Attorney General, to become a member of a cabinet. But nevertheless, in those days, President Zedillo asked me that. We were in a significant credibility crisis because some failures of the special prosecutors, one of the special prosecutors at the level of the Office of the Attorney General, regarding a very sensitive case on the assassination of Jose Francisco Ruiz Macié. That's why, facing that issue, President Zedillo asked me that. As I said, I dreamed that all my life will be within the National University of Mexico, teaching and doing some research. But after that request, I said, okay, I will do it. If you think, President, that I will be the one, I will do it. And by the way, it was the first time in which the President only presented the nomination of the Attorney General before the Senate, and the Senate had to approve that. when President Zedillo administration started, the first Attorney General was a member of the PAN, not from the PRI. And I think I was elected because I have no political party. I have no political party in Mexico. I have no political party in the States. Because I thought that to teach constitutional law, that is about the power, the use of power, the control of power, one should be totally unbiased. And if you have a political compromise, a partisan compromise, perhaps your way of teaching should be totally unbiased. So I decided to stay away from the political parties. And today, it's kind of the same rule. So I became serving that position. It was 4 years, very intense years, with a lot of emergencies. Every single day we had a different emergencies. I will not repeat that experience, but I feel very honored, very recognized for that opportunity to serve my country.
One of the things that you had to deal with during that time was issues of corruption or perceptions of corruption. Could you tell us a little bit about the ways you attempted to reverse that process?
Yes, corruption is still a major problem, not only in the office of the prosecutors or the federal police or state police. It's all over Mexico. But of course, one of the most sensitive corruption flanks is the police. It's so close to our interest, our own security. So I understand that very well. When President Zedillo started his administration and my predecessor, Mr. Lozano, decided to start cleaning the house. So from 800 police officers, he fired 500. Wonderful. I said, this is a very good move and the proper thing to do. Nevertheless, these people went to the courts and they start winning cases. And many of them were reinstalled in their positions because the legislation was not very good. It was not very proper. So when I start my assignment as Attorney General, I said, I will continue this, but I will change the strategy. I will start changing or proposing the change of the legislation applicable to these people. So we suggest the change of Article 123. It's the labor rights. By saying, if one police officer, one member of the law enforcement agencies is dismissed, and in the future, a court of law find that this dismiss was unjustified, he's entitled for indemnification, but not to take the position again. So with that new legal framework, we start cleaning the house. And we create something named Centro de Control de Confianza. It was our vetting organization. And we create 5 different exams, tests, to be passed by police officers and even prosecutors, experts, administrative staff, all the staff of the AG, of the Attorney General Office. So we have the polygraph. We have psychological test. We examine the economic environment, the family, many things. And only those approving all 5 tests were entitled to stay working with us. And we fire again 2/3 of the federal police, almost 1/2 of our prosecutors. And well, that was one of my intentions. What I saw is that we need to clean the house. We need to modernize our legislation. And we need a lot of international cooperation. And this is something that probably is not working very well. In my time, I had a wonderful cooperation with my neighbor countries, with the US and with Guatemala. So we signed new agreements, memorandum of understandings, international bilateral treaties. I had wonderful counterparts in the States. The most significant one was the Attorney General of the United States, Madame Janet Reno. We had even a direct telephone to have direct communication between the two ends. We had a wonderful relationship with the FBI, with my friend Luis Free, with the ONDCP, General Barry McCaffrey. McCaffrey became my friend. We are still very good friends. And in Guatemala, we had the same. Because in order to tackle drug trafficking, we say we need the house clean. We need to train our people. We need modern technology. We need international cooperation. And we need a very good police intelligence. The only way to succeed is not by using the war or cannons or weapons to kill the members of the cartels. I said, we need to drive the cartels. Let's take the money. Let's see where the money is. Let's seize the money. And it will be a much better perspective to succeed. And we had some good results. As you understand, we didn't finish the problem. The problem is still there. Yes, but it was interesting.
I believe that you would agree the most influential case your office investigated was the paramilitary attack which resulted in the deaths of the 45 indigenous peasants in Untitled, Chiapas in December 1997. A large number of individuals were convicted and sent to prison after the completion of your office's investigation. And some of those convictions have been appealed to the Mexican Supreme Court. And in a number of instances, the court has released certain individuals, concluding that the evidence against them was obtained illegally. We know you have denied that accusation publicly. How do you respond to those accusations?
Actial was a horrible case. The worst case I had in my term as Attorney General. 45 people were killed, 17 had injuries. In a place in the highland of Chiapas, very complicated, very, very complicated. The municipality of Chenaló. So we start by analyzing the antecedents of this terrible event. And what we found is that it was a series of crimes between different groups, the same ethnic group, the South Seal group, but with many interests, and divided into two after the Zapatistas uprising. So there were a group identified with the Zapatistas, and they were against them, identified as well as priistas. They didn't know what was a priistas, but anyway, it was the opposite of the Zapatistas. And we had families divided into two. A lot of issues, rapes, people stealing from others, violations, the social, the net, I would say, the fabric of that community was totally destroyed. And in that framework, Actial came up. We did our best. I put my best people investigating the crime. And we filed charges against, I don't know, hundreds of people. Indigenous peoples of the same ethnia, civil servants, public servants of the state of Chiapas. We indicted the coordinator of public safety, the coordinator of the director of the police. Yes, so when we had the probable cause accredited, we present charges. You can imagine that doing this investigation in the top of the hill with people of the same families, with the same last names, with the same profiles, it was very, very difficult, very difficult. So we collect evidence, and when we had enough evidence to present the indictment, we presented. We presented that. Many years after, the Supreme Court changed the rules of due process, and this is part of the ruling. And he said that one piece of evidence was obtained illegally. Not really. I really don't know. We had thousands of pieces of evidence in all of the criminal causes. But I never direct my people to do that. Perhaps it was a mistake. Yeah. One police officer changed the position 7 years after the first deposition. And the Supreme Court gave credit to that. So I totally disagree with the Supreme Court. With all due respect, very respectfully. I don't think that they have the right, they have the truth. But anyway, it's the legal truth, it's the legal truth. Yes, difficult, very, very sad, very horrible case.
Do you believe that the rule of law, one of President Zedillo's most significant personal policy goals, expressed to me in an interview in July 1994, is viewed so poorly by citizens in general in Mexico that the resolution of any major criminal case is extremely difficult to resolve?
Let me say that during my term in the office, and I speak for myself, I cannot speak on behalf of President Zedillo, it's my personal opinion. Well, I had probably the most sensitive cases in modern Mexico, criminal cases. The assassination of Cardinal Posadas, the Cardinal of Guadalajara. The assassination of Mr. Luis Donaldo Colosio. The assassination of Jose Francisco Ruiz Macian, the Secretary General of the PRI. And believe me that we were devoted to solve the problems with a lot of transparency and accountability in a very transparent way. In the case of Colosio, we have a special prosecutor. Today is the chairman of the National Commission for Human Rights. He performed excellent. We developed 22 lines of investigation in order to leave everything clear. And when we finish, we leave everything open to the public in the library of the PGR. In the case of Cardinal Posadas, we invite the Catholic clergy to work with us, to give us information, to discuss and debate the things. And for 2 years we had this conversation with them. Not easy, it was not easy. But I think at the end, I think that the initial conclusion of the PGR was okay, it was totally right. The same with Jose Francisco Ruiz Macian. You know, it was an over-politicized problem because the family of former President Salinas was involved with that. We'll have everything on paper and to the view of the public opinion. Files are there. If there are people interested in what we did, it's okay, they can consult that. I have no doubts of it. But you know, I think that in this type of assassinations and murders, the thesis of complot is always there. So people always will be thinking that there is a complot, that the former administration was behind that, this and that. It's something that we cannot change because we have problems with the rule of law, with the belief of the rule of law. And that thing that many times that produce this type of public conclusions.
Do you think that when you're serving in a transitional government from a semi-authoritarian political model to a model of democracy and transition, that it's very hard to alter perceptions that people have about the degree of transparency that typifies this kind of investigation? And consequently, when you have a governmental system that doesn't allow for transparency, you increase the likelihood that people believe rumors because there's nothing that contradicts the rumors that has any credibility.
Yes, well, let me tell you that for me, it was very easy to follow the direction of President Zedillo. I was a member of his cabinet. But with me, as a prosecutor, the only direction is always go by the book. Always go by the book. This is what my son believed. We were totally synchronized. We never said, do this or don't, or follow that line or forget that one. It was always totally independent. It's the only way to be a prosecutor, totally independent. Let's see what happened in the United States these days. I'm crossing my fingers that will happen the same. But in terms of perceptions, you can do your best. You can do very clean, very accurate, very profound investigations, and nevertheless, the perception is there, that there is something wrong, that there are dirty interests behind your resolutions. That is difficult to change. We need to change culture, and we need to follow the rule of law always. That is something pending in our daily lives in Mexico, and for many years. This is nothing new, but we have to change it as soon as we can.
You were a member of the president's cabinet that experienced the major change to take place in 70 years as there was the election of new President Fox. Could you talk a little bit about the experience at the end of your administration and the transfer of power to the Fox administration?
It was very interesting. I described those days, in my viewpoint, as having a room with a window and a window with a view. So I didn't play a specific role in that electoral process, but I was in the first row. And for President Zedillo, the directive to the cabinet was very easy. This election will be won by the one with more votes. Easy. Easy. It's very easy to say that. Very complicated after 70 and some years of the same ruling party. So what I saw, it's a completely clear election, and at the end, we have to put the presidency in the hands of the opposition. Not my opposition, because I said I have no political party. I think that in the President Zedillo cabinet, only 2 or 3 had that situation of not having a partisan life. The Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Oncology, myself. And it was extremely interesting. Because, see what is going on today in the election today. There are some rumors now reflected in the major newspapers by saying the candidate of that party is involved in that type of crime. So perhaps the report to the police and then the leak to the newspapers. That is awful. They tried to do that in my time, but as I said, I have no role to play in this party, in this match. So I never accept those type of things. And I'm totally convinced that the candidate that won had more votes, no matter the political party.
Jorge, from a pragmatic perspective, and you've commented on this earlier, what were the difficulties you faced as the Attorney General in implementing the policies and responsibilities of your agents? And what limitations do you recall as being most important in affecting your ability to alter the behavior of your staff in investigating and prosecuting cases?
I think that it is very important to recognize where the enemy is located. Sometimes the enemy, the criminals, are in front of you. Sometimes are in your back. So what any Attorney General would need is to have a staff with total confidence that you may trust all the time, no matter the type of issue that you are analyzing. So I think that, to me, a big problem, it was precisely some of my staff members. I would remember that the first commissioner against drugs, the general of the army. 3 months after the appointment, we knew that he was involved with one of the cartels. And we put him behind bars. And that was a good hit for all the team. So the correct appointment of your staff or your collaborators is crucial on this. And to have confidence in them all the way is totally crucial, it's totally significant. The system must work differently. We have now a new system. Hopefully, the system may work with this new accusatorial system. But, you know, the system will fail if we do not change the way of thinking of the law enforcement personnel. I don't know if that change has happened after I left Mexico 70 years ago. Perhaps there are new training, and now we may be confident. We must trust in all of the law enforcement officials. I don't know. But for more technicalities or for more training that they may have in specific areas, if they don't change the way of thinking and the role of the rule of law and all of this, I think the results will not be very satisfactory.
Since 2000, Mexico is clearly an electoral democracy. What do you see as the obstacles to Mexico achieving a much broader, fuller democracy?
Very important questions. I would say that our electoral system is pretty good. It's very good. Participation is growing. Accountability is there. There are more transparency. Yes, we have an electoral democracy. We live under a whole democracy? I have my doubts. In a country in which 43.6% of the population lives in poverty, it's difficult to say that we are living a democracy. In a country in which the rule of law is not consistent, is so weak, it's difficult to say that we are living in full democracy. In a country in which we see the inequalities, the lack of income distribution that we see every day, it's difficult to say that we are living in a full democracy. So we have many things pending, Bill. I think that we must consolidate our electoral system. This is very good. It was a very important move forward. We need to accept and recognize and honor the people to make that possible. Yes, of course. But the things that are in the future are very important, very significant. We need to work collectively in solving the problem of inequality in Mexico. This is very painful, very painful. And of course, as I said many times, we need to believe in the rule of law. Without the rule of law, it will be very difficult to tackle major issues of Mexico with possibilities of having a success.
So, in a sense, do you believe some of those same conditions that you were trying to alter back in the 1990s continue to impact on the ability of recent attorney generals to perform their functions effectively and with integrity as well?
I would love to see that things change. I have my doubts. I have my terrible doubts. Because, as I said, you can be a wonderful prosecutor, but you need to think in terms of being totally confident, to have no compromises with anyone, to be really unbiased, to be armored against corruption, you see? I think those are the most significant areas that we must be watching. Hopefully this have changed. And with the new system implemented 1 year ago, conditions in law enforcement area, in the criminal system, are different. I'm crossing my fingers to that.
Mexicans in the United States have the opportunity to be citizens of both Mexico and the United States and vote in both countries. You've been actively involved in encouraging the Mexican population to use that opportunity. Could you talk about that and what you see its potential impact may be?
We as Mexicans are entitled to vote abroad since 2006, I guess, for the first presidential election. And we have a very good system. I'm very confident on the system. It's the absentee ballot. So our ballot will be sent way in advance. We will cast the ballot and send back through a private company now. And I think in the past was the Mexican Postal Service, but I think now will be something private. And the results, the ballots, will come way in advance to be counted for the day of the election, for July the 1st. It's very expensive. Mexico is paying a lot of money to make this possible. And I really don't know if there is enough consciousness of this issue in Mexicans living, in this case, in the States. So we are disseminating this information. The staffers of the National Electoral Institute is visiting different states. They are speaking directly to the people. They're talking directly. So I think that we will have better results than in the past. Because every single vote of Mexicans abroad, it was a huge amount of money. And very reduced number of ballots deposited in Mexico. So hopefully, Bill, this will change. We are campaigning aggressively. There is no political party campaign on this. It's just totally unbiased on behalf of the National Electoral Institute. And let's see, hopefully the results will be better.
What about Mexicans in the United States and their opportunities to become U.S. citizens and have an impact on voting patterns here?
Well, I practice a little bit of mathematics. I'm not very good for mathematics. That's why I'm a lawyer. But you know, I try to figure out what may happen with 3.2 million Mexicans that are already legal permanent residents becoming citizens, having the registration and voting in one hand, plus 2 million Mexicans, already U.S. citizens, that didn't participate in the election of 2016. The sum of these two figures is more than 5 million votes. And I imagine that 5 million votes may represent changes in the political arena of this country. I'm not saying to them, vote red, vote blue. I don't care. I always say, vote for those candidates that represent something for the Latino community. Represent something for the Latino community. In 45 years in this country, the Latino community will be the largest demographic group. But I try to figure out what the Latino community will be in 45 years. Because in 45 years, many things may change. Are we ready to keep, to persevere, to conserve all of our values, the principles, the ideas that make possible to identify the group as Latino? Don't know. This is the task that we must complete. The current generations, the baby boomers, the X generation, to see perhaps for the millennials a better country, because this will be a better U.S. with better horizon for the Latin American countries as well. This is a gain, a win-win for all players. So we are trying to convince them. And the problem with Mexicans is that we are the group with, in percentage numbers, with less application for citizenship every year. And we take the double of time to become U.S. citizens than the rest of countries of origin. So we need to change that. It's, again, a cultural change by saying you have a double privilege. You have a double honor. You have a double benefit. You can be a citizen of Mexico or whatever, and U.S. citizens at the same time. It's wonderful, but we need to work. We need to convince my people to do that.
Finally, a trick question. Which of the following three officials has the most authority? A general in the army, an attorney general in the government, or a FIFA referee?
I don't think that the FIFA referee will be in the same footing. Now, of course, the reputation of the military in Mexico is very good. I would say that they have been considered in high quality, in high-ranking position. And the Supreme Court justices as well. I think the Supreme Court has very good recognition. Today, the Supreme Court is totally independent. In the past, it didn't happen exactly the same. They are playing a more important, more significant role in public life. So I think that little by little, the Mexican population will be appreciating in a much better condition a Supreme Court justice.